All right, guys, we're back again with Islam. Um, so, idea of the hijab. First of all, something that very few people know is that the hijab and its head covering is a tribute to Isa's mother, Mary, and that's really cool. Is that the sense of the hijab is supposed to be a shout out, a respect that goes back to the second highest prophet in all of Islam, and that is Jesus. Um, the hijab is basically the focus of trying to behave and dress modestly, which is a main focus of Islam. So many of us see it as kind of repression, but at the same sense, there is something beautiful to the notion that I have something that is special to me and that I'm going to respect that enough to treat that with that level of honor and respect. And if I get married, that 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 beauty, that part of me, isn't something I just share with everybody. It's something that I keep for my spouse, and that my spouse and I share in that intimate part of who we are as people. And and there's something beautiful in that, and something to respect in that. Now, so this idea of not trying to draw sexual attention to oneself is part of that kind of humility and part of that modesty. Now, some scholars specifically think that the areas, depending on what has to be covered, um, most require that everything beside the face and the hands be covered, and some require all but the eyes to be covered using garments like burqas. Um, these requirements are enforced by law in some places like Iran. The hijab has been seen kind of, especially the veil, has been some kind of sign of oppression for Islamic women. And in its essence, it's not about oppression. But at the same point, when you walk into a Wegmans or a Tops in the middle of a 100-degree day and you see an Islamic family, you see women all wrapped up and completely in this really difficult um, you know, clothing to have to wear in a 100-degree day, taking care of 7 or 8 kids that are around them, and then you have the husband in shorts and a t-shirt, just wandering around, excuse me, without a care in the world. That sometimes sends the message that doesn't really match up with this idea of modesty. Why one, why the men have a different standard than the women. So something to really kind of consider. Another thing that kind of has come up is the issue of Sharia law. People get super nervous about this. Sharia can be understood as God's will for all mankind. Now, the fiqh is the body of law produced by scholars trying to understand that. So, so it's part of human interpretation, and it can be fallible. Now, Islamic law demands very severe punishments for certain crimes. Now, these include adultery and fornication, accusing someone of fornication, um, consuming intoxicants, some types of theft, and robbery. But the stated punishments are coupled with very high standards of proof. So it's very rarely carried out. And it's primarily supposed to act as a deterrent for the person. So the super bad punishments, but the burden of proof is so high that it very rarely ever gets carried out, and it's supposed to just you know uh, push people to deter them from doing these things. For example, in the case of adultery, the Quran says that there must be 4 reliable witnesses to the act. Really, 4 people? And anyone who accuses somebody of adultery without those witnesses should be punished. So the burden of proof is super, super high. So that's a possible it's strong deterrent with a high burden of proof. Now there are councils primarily to facilitate granting religious divorces to Muslim women who don't have uh, a way of like kind of speaking up for themselves. So in a lot of ways, Sharia is uh, helping the lower ends of the Muslim world. Um, Early Muslim judges went to great lengths to avoid implementing very difficult punishments by finding little, ambiguities in the case that would allow the guilt of the accused. It couldn't be, punished. This principle kind of followed the words of the Prophet Muhammad, where he said, "Ward off these harsh punishments from the Muslims as much as you can. And if you can find a way out for the person, let them go. For it's better to err on the side of mercy than err in punishment." That I don't think if you ask people, they would associate that with Islam. So, in the case of adultery, for example, many jurists find if someone has confessed to the act, but then subsequently retracted their confession, they couldn't face those strict punishments. And many argued that if a woman's pregnancy was not sufficient to evidence that adultery had occurred, so, for example, where a woman's husband had been absent for a long time, jurists claimed rather improbably that her pregnancy may have originated with her husband years previously, but just has lain dormant until now. So, talk about finding any way out they can. Um, it's some powerful stuff. Altogether, then, it seems that these punishments are intended to be to ward people off from committing the crimes, and then with a standard of proof that's high enough that the punishments are rarely carried out. The central principle of the application of this was to maximize mercy. So, in reality, this didn't mean that people accused of crimes got off scot free. It just meant that they might not have been subjected to these really strict punishments. There's very little evidence that Western Muslims want these really strict laws to be implemented. Um, we hear that a lot in really conservative, anti Muslim people who think, oh, Sharia law is coming to Western countries like America. But many Western Muslims look at the harsh punishments that happen in places like Saudi Arabia and they're disgusted by it, and they don't believe that they want a part of that. So now to divide up the two types of the major denominations of Islam. We'll get to that in our next video.